Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman. This is our continuing series on YouTube with videos to help you improve your game. And we're kind of all over the map here with our videos, which is good because chess isn't all about just one thing like learning an opening or learning an end game. It's about learning how to think, it's learning how to manage your time. In fact, I think I'll do a video on introduction to time management because time is such an important part of chess since you have two resources when you're playing. You have the board and you have the clock. But today's video is going to be called the King of the Hill. What is this term, the King of the Hill? Well, today if you look at kids playing, they all have their mobile phone out and they're playing video games, maybe against a million other people all around the world on their app. But in the old days, we didn't have the handheld computers. In fact, we might not have had any computers at all, and we couldn't play computer games, so we actually had to go outside and actually play there. And one of the games that was not very popular when I was a kid, because it was a little even before my time, was called King of the Hill. And with King of the Hill, there'd be a mound of dirt somewhere, and the kids would all scramble to see who could get on top of the dirt first. And the one kid would get on top of the dirt, and then everybody else would try to pull him down and replace them with somebody. And then that person would be the king of the hill, and so on. They would keep trying to pull down the king of the hill and replace him with somebody else. All right, so yeah, we don't play too many King of the Hills anymore. I don't think I've seen too many people play King of the Hill. But what's that got to do with chess? And the answer is a lot. We have a concept in chess that's called King of the Hill. And I'm not sure if that's a Dan term or that's a term that started before my time. I think I got it from someone, so I don't think I should take any credit for it. But basically the idea of King of the Hill is as such. Suppose you're playing a simultaneous exhibition where you're one of the people in the exhibition. You're one of the 20 people that the master is playing. So they've set up a big rectangle of boards, and the master's going around inside, and he's walking from board to board to board, playing 20 people at a time. And the rule usually is when he gets to your board, you have to move, but you can't move before he gets to your board, because if you move before he gets to your board, it gets confusing. He has to wait and try to figure out what you did. So the rule is you can only move if and only if when he gets to your board, and at that point you have to move. If you don't move at that point, then you lose. Now, sometimes people give you buys where you have 3 passes per simul. You could pass 3 times, but generally you have to move when he gets to the board, because if you don't move, you're giving everybody else in the whole simul more time. Well, when you're doing that, that's a lot different than when you're playing a regular game with a clock. What should you do? Well, you have to play the best move you found so far, and the best move you found so far is the King of the Hill. So when you're playing a simul and he gets to your board, you're always playing the King of the Hill. Why is this different from a regular game where you have a clock? Because when you have a regular game with a clock, you don't have to play just one move in that amount of time. You have to play all your moves in that amount of time. So it's a very big skill in chess, which I call micro time management, to figure out which moves should get more time and which moves should get less time. You're not fixed to move at a certain amount of time. After a certain amount of time, you may think that's more than enough and you've already moved, or you may have not nearly gotten enough time and you need more time to figure out what you want to do. And that's part of your skill in a regular game, that you're not just moving when someone gets there. So why does King of the Hill matter so much if it's when you move in a simul but not in a regular tournament game? And the answer is you're trying to follow Lasker's rule, which is when you see a good move, don't play it. Look for a better one. What's your goal? Your goal isn't to necessarily play the best move, because you might sit there for a million years and your clock will fall. You have a clock and the position. So your goal is to play the best move you can in a reasonable amount of time for that particular situation, where the situation is defined as the position on the board and the clock situation, like what's the time control, how many minutes do you have left, what move number it is, that kind of thing. So if you're trying to find the best move you can, obviously if you have a move that you think might be the best one, there may be a better one. But the one you currently think is the best one is called your King of the Hill, And when you're trying to find a better move, you're trying to compare the move that you're playing with the king of the hill to see which one you like better. And when you do that, it's a little bit more complex than just comparing the move, because a lot more things are going on than just comparing moves. You're not really comparing moves, you're comparing positions. But what positions are you comparing? If you compare the position on the very first move after you make that move, if both positions are quiet, which we called quiescent positions, then you might be able to do that. So if your king of the hill is move A and your candidate move is move X, you could compare the position after move A with the position after move X to see which one you like better. Much more likely is your opponent might have a chance to do something. Let's say after move A, your king of the hill, his most dangerous or best reply is move B. And then you look ahead and you say, aha, but if he makes move B, I can make move C. And let's do the same thing with your candidate move X. You say, if I make move X, he can make move Y, and I can then make move Z. Then what you're comparing, if you assume that those are best move sequences, what you're doing is you're comparing the position after C, which is your king of the hill position, with the position after Z, which is your candidate move X position. You're looking at the sequence after ABC compared to XYZ, and you're comparing position C with position Z, and what you're doing is you're evaluating each position, and whichever evaluation is better becomes the king of the hill. So if the evaluation of position C prime is the best position, then you're going to keep A as your king of the hill. If your evaluation of Z prime is better than your evaluation of C prime, you're going to substitute X as your new king of the hill instead of A. And you're going to say, if I had to move right now, if the master came to my board, I would play move X. All right, and then you keep doing that till you're satisfied that you've either used enough time or that you have the best move that you can. All right, so enough of the theory. I'm sure you're a little bored by that. Let's take a look at a couple positions and see what we can do. Here's a position from my game with John Pommeljanz in 1970. I was an up-and-coming young expert, and John Pommeljanz was a well-established Eastern board, expert master, and I was white in this position. So let's take a look. What am I trying to do here? Well, right now I've got 4 pieces on the back rank besides my king, but the rook on e1 is in pretty good shape. So what I really want to do is develop my queen on d1, my bishop on c1, and my rook on a1. There's a lot of ways of doing this. Does black have any big threats at the moment? Well, he might be able to play queen to b7, followed by threatening the d-pawn, and if I try to play bishop e4 guarding it, maybe he could play f5 removing the guard. But I don't have to worry about that too much, because if his queen ever takes on d5, my rook can take on e7. So, excuse me. So he might have some vague threats, but no big threats at the moment. So I'm going to look at developing moves. Now, beginners love to play bishop h6 here. They go, well, I got to bring out the bishop anyway. Why not attack the rook? I think this is left over from when they were beginners, and they would play bishop h6, and then black wouldn't move the rook, and they'd win the exchange. Or they'd play bishop h6, and then when the rook would move, they'd play queen f6, and they'd play queen g7 checkmate. Well, it's okay to move the bishop to h6, but we have to be getting something out of that. And if we play bishop h6, which is not a terrible move, black's just going to play rook on f to e8 and put the rook on the open file where it's much better anyway. And the only thing we really got out of that is we developed the bishop, and maybe the rook on e8's not guarding f7 anymore. So if we could somehow play bishop h6 and then attack f7, that would make sense. But black can easily save f7. He could play moves like bishop f8, threatening to trade bishops and guarding f7 with the queen. He has lots of things he can do. So bishop h6, I mean, if we won, it's the first move we looked at. Since the first move we look at is always our king of the hill, we could make it our king of the hill. Let's see if we can find a better idea. Can we play g4 and drive the knight back? Well, if the knight goes back to g7, that actually works pretty well, because then the knight can't go to h5 or f5 or e6, and that knight is maybe not so good. I know a lot of people would yell and scream and say, oh, you're pushing the pawns in front of your king, but that's exactly what you need to do sometimes in positions similar to this. All right, so the problem with g4 though is I think he can just play knight f6 and attack my pawn on d5, and now my bishop can't, well, my bishop can go to the e4, but it's kind of silly. So I'm really helping him attack my, playing g4 takes his knight off the rim and helps attack my pawn on d5, and that seems to do more for black than it does for me. So it doesn't replace bishop h6 as the king of the hill. What about developing the queen with queen to d2? Well, that threatens the bishop on e7, but again, he could easily save it. He could play bishop f6. That would block his knight's best square, and then I could play g4, but he could still play knight g7. Or if I play queen e2, he could play rook fe8. Not clear that playing queen e2 is better than bishop h6. All right, how about developing something to d2 to stop him from playing c3 and make him to keep guarding the knight on a5? So I could play queen to d2, or I could play bishop to d2. Those are both interesting candidate moves. On bishop to d2, in some lines I might be able to play bishop c3 or b4 and then queen d2, and then his knight is attacked twice and has to go back to b7, which is a pretty terrible square, because from b7 he can't go to c5 and he can't go to d6. So if I can get that knight possibly to move back to b7, that would be wonderful. And if I don't play bishop or d2 or queen d2, maybe he can play c3 or maybe b4 followed by c3 and get his queenside pawn majority rolling. So already I'm maybe liking bishop d2 or queen d2 better than bishop h6. All right, well, I don't want to analyze this position to death. I just want to give you that concept that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compare the moves I'm looking at with the best move I had before. If the best move was bishop h6, I'm not surprised that maybe I have a slightly better move. And if the computer tells me I'm full of soup and bishop h6 is the best move, I wouldn't be surprised. That wouldn't be the first time that happened. Let's bring the computer analysis onto the screen here. We'll shrink the board and we'll hit analysis here on the ICC. Analysis button, start. Best three moves. Okay, the computer liked my idea. Bishop to d2. It's fighting it out with knight to g5 for number one and knight to h2. Well, I didn't finish my thought process, and there's that move g4 as the third best move right now. As I said, these are the kind of positions where a move like g4 is not unreasonable. So, okay, I didn't finish the thought process, but you get the idea. I was in the process of trying to prove that bishop h6 wasn't the best move, it shouldn't be my king of the hill, that it should have been replaced by something else. All right, let's pick a random position and try it again. They just were finished the fast version of the St. Louis tournament, so let me pick a random game from there. Examine St. Louis 19%. I don't know. Let's see. The year is 2019. Let's pick game number 19. Okay, 1919. There we go. Yang Yi against Mamedorov. All right, so now we need a move number. Well, we just did 1919, so let's take black's 19th move. So let's go forward 36 moves to finish 18 moves. Okay, so black is just captured on e4, looking like he's going to sacrifice the exchange. And let's see if Yang Yi takes the exchange. He does. Okay, so it's black's turn, and we need a candidate move. Well, he's got to recapture the knight, so the only two candidate moves are knight takes e4 and d takes e4. So let's just pick one, make it king of the hill, and see if we can figure out if the other one is better. Let's play d takes e4. D takes e4. All right, so that opens the d file for the queen to attack the knight. Black has a knight and a pawn for the rook. The knight on d4 is safe. The kingside majority for black after d takes e5 doesn't look like I'm in big trouble. So, okay, I think white's okay after d takes e5. So let's see if we can knock off that with knight takes e4. Knight takes e4 threatens to win the bishop pair with knight takes c3. Let's say white stops black from doing that by either counterattacking the bishop on b6 with a5 or playing a move like bishop to b4 or something like that. So knight takes e4. If bishop takes b4, bishop to b4, maybe black can play queen to g5 and threaten bishop takes h3. And if white plays f4, he's pinning his knight on d4. And he can't because the knight on g6 can take it. So after knight takes e5, not only is knight takes c3 a threat, but maybe queen g5 is also. All right, so what I'm starting to determine here is even though d takes e4 gets rid of the isolated d pawn and does a discovered attack on the knight on d4, I'm starting to think that knight takes e4 is a new king of the hill. And not only is it going to be king of the hill, it's going to be the move I play, because white just captured a rook and I have to capture a knight or else I'm down a rook. So I really only have two candidate moves. So if my first candidate move is the king of the hill and I can prove the other one is better, I'm pretty much done. I don't need to look further because all the other moves are probably silly. So I think that Mamedyarov played knight takes e4. Let's see if he did. And he did. And he did it relatively quickly. Let's see if the computer agrees. All right, Mr. Computer, you've got two candidate moves. Let's see here. Knight takes e4, d takes e4. Computer says, Dan, you're right. Knight takes e4 leaves black better by about 4/10 to 5/10 of a pawn. And d takes e4 leaves white better by 5 or 6/10 of a pawn. So there's a little over a pawn difference in the evaluation between our first move, which was their king of the hill, d takes e4, and our second move, which became the new king of the hill, and actually the move that we played, which is knight takes e4. So luckily I picked one where the analysis wasn't that hard. Okay, so let's pull the analysis back off the screen. Okay. All right, so king of the hill, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the whole idea that you have a series of candidate moves. You're going to pick one out that looks like it's the best so far. You're not going to play it. You're going to keep replacing it by king of the hills until one of two things happens, which I call the two move triggers. Either you've run out of reasonable time for that move, or you can prove that the move that there can't possibly be a move that's clearly better than the move that you're going to play. If you can prove that there can't possibly be a move that's clearly better than the move you're going to play, then it's either the best move or very, very close to the best move, in which case you should just do it because further thought is going to be silly. But a lot of times that's not when you would end. You would end when your time is reasonable and you found a reasonable enough move and you just make that move. In that sense, it's not like the simul. It's much more you're controlling it, but you have to determine what's reasonable for that amount of time based on the time limit and stuff. Let's look at the time limit in the next example and see what we can find. We didn't do it on this one. We just did it very quickly. So let's pull up another game from St. Louis. So we just did 19. How about 119? St. Louis, 19%, 119. Okay, Vacher Legrave against Fabiano Cariano. And sure, this time we'll do white's 19th move. So let's go forward 36 moves. Okay, and black's just played knight to c5, hitting the bishop on b3. Okay, so in this case, our time management tells us we're playing a 5-3 game. We only have 4 minutes and 10 seconds left to finish the game. The queens have been traded. It could be a very, very long endgame. So we have to figure out what would be a maximum amount of time we could take for this move. Well, we can save that bishop any number of ways. I would say probably taking no more than about 10 seconds would be reasonable here. Let's see if we can list all the safe moves. Bishop to d5 is safe. Bishop to c4 is safe. Bishop c2, bishop d1, bishop a2, rook a3. Those are all candidates. Well, some of those aren't so clear. If we play bishop a2, he's got knight takes a4, so maybe it's not safe. If we have bishop d5 and he plays rook d8 skewering us, then that's not maybe so good. Also, we could take him first. We could play knight takes c8, and if black plays knight takes b3, we can play, maybe knight b6 hitting his rook. So maybe that's a candidate move. But probably what's going to happen is it's only a speed game, so Vacher Legrave's just going to probably just move that bishop. And my guess is he played bishop c2 relatively quickly, and I'll bet he started with that as his main candidate, and he said, boy, if I can do that, Maybe I can win the e-pawn. I guess we should look at bishop takes f7 check first. Not first, but also bishop takes f7, rook takes f7, knight takes f7, king takes f7, knight takes e5 check, knight takes e5, rook takes e5. We have two pawns and a rook for a bishop and a knight. If we use Reinfeld numbers, that sounds great, 7 to 6, but actually that's probably pretty terrible. After rook takes e5, we are hitting the knight on c5. Knight on c5 would just probably, he would play b6 or something, develop the bishop. I'm not convinced that bishop takes f7 is the best move, but it's not terrible. You know, if we can get a rook and two pawns for the two pieces in the middle game, that's usually not a good idea, but that would take us toward the end game, where maybe it would be okay. So bishop takes f7 check is a candidate. Okay, well, back to our conclusions. We're going to conclude that bishop c2 is probably the move he played, unless he was really aggressive in going for bishop f7 check, which I highly doubt. But let's see what he did. Bishop c4 makes me look silly, but it was one of our candidate moves. And I did not replace my king of the hill with bishop c4. And let's see if the computer agrees again with our analysis here. So we'll go back and we'll say to Stockfish, all right, show me the top 3 moves. And Stockfish says white is winning the game. He's up like a pawn and a half. And his top 3 moves right now are bishop c4. See, that's why Vasily Legrave's the top grandmaster. Bishop a2 and bishop d5, and it's very close. As you can see, they're kind of fighting. They're changing places as we talk. Bishop c4 and bishop d, and now bishop a2 just moved into number 1. And he's looking 30 ply ahead. Well, you know, Vasily Legrave is not looking 30 ply ahead with 4 minutes left on his clock. So, but they think bishop c4, bishop a2, best moves. Okay, we'll stop the analysis. We'll recenter the board. I think we have time for one more. Okay, we're going to do another king of the hill. All right, this time we'll do it in honor of my age. Examine St. Louis, 19%, 69, Iranian Yang Yi. We can't go to my age for the move number because the game would probably be over. So let's do white's 26th move. So let's go forward 48. That's move number 24. White plays queen to a5, hitting the knight, and black plays queen to b3, hitting the bishop. Okay, so it's white's move. Time management is pretty clear. He's got 51 seconds left to finish the game. So the time management says a reasonable amount of time to take on this move is about 3 seconds, so that by the time the increment runs, I'll still have 51 seconds left. Well, there's not that many ways to save the bishop. Rook b1 pins the rook. Looks very awkward. Rook a2, not possible. So we're really talking about bishop c3, bishop a3, queen d2, queen c3, bishop c1 looks bad after queen d1 check, but I could put the queen in the way, queen e1. I think bishop a3 looks like my king of the hill. It attacks the pawn on e7, and in some lines it threatens to go bishop c5 and hit the knight. And after I hit the knight, if the knight moves, I could take off the a pawn. So that looks like the right idea. If you play bishop a3, knight d5, then I could maybe move the bishop anyway and threaten to take the a pawn. All right, I think bishop a3 is my king of the hill. Let's take a little more time, see if I can find a better move. Queen takes f5, queen takes b2, knight g5, threatening mate. Queen takes a1, he mates me first. I don't think that's too good. Knight g5 first, queen takes b2. Everything that allows queen takes b2 is bad. Suppose I play something more innocuous, like bishop c3. What's the point? Black can then play rook to a8, hitting my queen. That doesn't look real pleasant. If I play bishop a3 and he plays rook a8, maybe then I can play queen takes f5 and I'm okay. And if he then plays queen c3, hitting my rook and my bishop, what do I do? I guess I could play queen to b1. So I'm looking at bishop a3, rook a8, queen takes f5, queen c3, and then queen b1 to guard the rook. Interesting line that one is, actually. Nothing that I would be able to see in a 5-3 blitz game. All right, so I'm going to, because of that line, bishop a3, rook a8, queen takes f5, queen c3, queen b1. I seem to have gotten away with grabbing that f pawn in that line. A little hairy, but speed game, what the heck. All right, so that's going to be my analysis. Let's see what Iranian did. Wow, he took the pawn right away with the idea that if queen takes b2, rook to b1. Well, that's a quiescence error on my part, because I didn't even look to see after queen takes b2 that I could play rook to b1. I also assumed that in that case, the queen would go somewhere and my back rank would be weak. I would be worried about queen e2, rook takes b6, queen d1 check, knight e1, and queen takes e1 mate. So I would have thought that doesn't work. And black just plays e6. Huh. Let's ask the computer. All right, Mr. Computer. They've got me confounded here. Queen takes f5 is the best move, but he's losing anyway. Bishop a3 loses to knight c4 with a fork. And if you try to guard the bishop, he just takes, queen takes, rook takes, b5, and black wins the endgame. So that's why he didn't want to do that. Okay, so queen takes f5, and now queen takes b2 actually does work. Let's see why. Queen takes b2, rook to b1, queen to e2, and now the idea is first threaten mate with knight to g5. And how does he stop it? If he moves the rook to the open file, that's not his best move. What he should do is play queen h5, keeping an eye on d1. And now, of course, if rook takes b6, queen d1 is mate, as I said before. So it turns out nothing works. That's the problem. Okay, well, we've seen some examples here of King of the Hill. And just to remind everybody, the King of the Hill is the best move you've found so far. And in a simul, that's the move you're going to play. In a regular game, it's the move you're going to keep trying to replace as your clock runs until you're either got a move where you know there's not a better move or you run out of reasonable time. Okay, for the YouTube series, this is Dan Heisman. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Thanks. Bye.